Foundations remain like skeletal evidence, scattered across Florida's wilderness, concrete fragments half swallowed by a landscape of dense green and tangled undergrowth, where streets once cut through a bustling community, now only overgrown paths hint at what was lost. Vines curl through crumbling spaces where homes stood, where families lived, where a town once breathed with life and industry. And the land looks stripped, worn, as if something essential had been taken. Margaret Dershomer remembers it differently, though. When lumber was stacked so high, it felt like it was touching the sky. It was a lot for a little girl, Dershomer would say in an interview with the Tampa Bay Times in 1993. Every Sunday afternoon, Margaret would walk alongside her father through the lumber yard, stepping between massive logs that dwarfed her small frame, watching her father's practiced eye measure and assess. Frank Dershomer had a special talent. He was the highest-paid sawyer at the mill, could look at a tree and instantly calculate its potential. Our house was on the front street, Margaret would later recall, with a hint of pride, where the big dogs lived. Front Street, one of the two sand roads stretching a half-mile long, lined with elevated cypress plank sidewalks, was the main heart of this bustling town, filled with doctors, a restaurant, a movie theater, and more than 1,800 people. Dershomer was its last known living resident. Centralia, now just modern ruins, was a town that transformed ancient cypress trees into lumber at a staggering pace, 100,000 board feet every single day. And in just 7 years, this grand city and the forest it fed on disappeared. Welcome to Mysteries of the Marsh, where we uncover the Sunshine State's strangest legends, untamed histories, and forgotten chapters. I'm Samantha, and after further review of the family tree, I'm actually an 8th-generation Floridian, and I have a passion for stories that time almost forgot. Deep in Florida's past lies the ghost of a boomtown that blazed brighter and fell faster than almost any other in our state's wild history. Growing up here, I heard whispers of towns that vanished overnight, but this wasn't just another in a long line of wooden shack settlements. It was an industrial titan that devoured an entire forest, built an empire on steam and timber, and disappeared so quickly it was like the wilderness simply swallowed it whole. So grab the bug spray, lace up your boots, and get ready to explore how an entire town, teeming with life powered by industry, completely disappears in just 7 years. Florida has always been a state of fleeting promises, a landscape scarred by settlements that rise and vanish like morning mist. Turpentine camps, phosphate mines, logging towns, they dotted the wilderness like temporary kingdoms, each promising prosperity, each destined to disappear. But this town was different. When Edgar J. Roberts broke ground in 1910, he wasn't building just another temporary work camp. He was creating something more, a planned community that would defy the brutal pattern of extraction and abandonment. Workers hailed from across the globe, Scotland, Ireland, Germany, France, Italy, Finland, Canada, and nearly every U.S. state. About 1,200 laborers and their families, numbering another 300, would eventually call this place home. Roberts and his brother Baxter weren't just building a mill, they were constructing a society. The town boasted modern amenities that set it apart from isolated logging camps. A boarding house run by Mrs. George Varn from Brooksville welcomed visitors and unmarried workers. Dr. Johnson lived in town, providing medical care, while Dr. D.L. Heddick from Brooksville would visit monthly, setting up a dental office right in the hotel. Each Monday, salesmen from Knight and Wall in Tampa would arrive by train, taking orders that would be delivered by Wednesday. The commissary, run by George Gamble in partnership with Roberts, was a marvel, with 17-foot-high ceilings and rolling ladders to reach top shelves. No retail store in the state carried such an extensive stock. They sold everything from flour and cornmeal to clothing, tools, and even specialized provisions for the town's diverse population. And when 50 Greeks from Tarpon Springs arrived, George Gamble's store became a hub of unexpected cultural exchange. Only one among them spoke English. But the town found creative solutions. Johnny Doolittle, the lumber inspector, took it upon himself to learn Greek, trading English lessons with the workers in return for the small gifts, sponges, and other tokens they would bring him. When a local baker named James Condrey learned of the Greeks' arrival, he immediately sought a Greek baker to teach him how to make authentic Greek bread and pastries. The town pulsed with life after dark. Movies played at the Flicker Palace, while the hungry nuns served meals around the clock. During holidays, children picnicked at Double Sink, while their fathers hunted deer and turkey near Smokehouse. At night, Greeks danced to bagpipes at masquerade balls in the same building where Ginny Gosier and Gladys Chalker taught 8 grades of children during the day. Roberts knew isolation would kill a town faster than any business trouble. He personally funded the railroad connection to Took Lake and the Tampa Northern Line beyond. But this link to the outside world served another purpose. The railroad spur opened up a world of opportunity for the cypress forests of Hernando County. As traditional logging regions across the eastern United States were stripped bare, these swamps near the Gulf of Mexico represented a final magnificent treasure. 15,000 acres of red tidewater cypress that had remained untouched, protected by their own impenetrable geography. Cypress here could tower over 150 feet, with some specimens thousands of years old. A single log could yield enough lumber to build an entire house. Red tidewater cypress had already proven its worth in iconic structures such as the interior paneling of the New York Stock Exchange, the foundations of the Pentagon, and the paneling and furniture of the Biltmore estate. In fact, given the timing of the Centralia operation, it's possible that some of the cypress used in the decorative detailing of the Ringling Museum's Cottazon Mansion, completed in 1926, might have originated in these very forests. However, the reality of Robert's vision demanded a precise orchestration of men and machines pushing the limits of both technology and human endurance. In the cypress swamps, where ancient trees stood like silent giants, every step of the logging process carried its own deadly risks. The first challenge was felling. Teams of men wielded specialized 14-foot distance saws. The physical toll was brutal. Hours of perfect coordination between teams as they pulled these massive blades back and forth through dense cypress wood in the swamp's suffocating heat. But the real killer wasn't the size. It was what lurked inside. Years of Gulf winds created windshake, invisible fault lines running through the timber. When a saw struck one of these weak points, the results were catastrophic. Trees would explode without warning, sending jagged wooden spears flying in every direction. For the men working in close proximity, it was like standing in the heart of a storm of wooden shrapnel. And when a cypress this size finally fell, the impact was devastating. The ground shuddered violently, and the crash echoed for miles. Crews had to run, and run fast, as these giants came down. Anything caught beneath them, men, equipment, even other trees, would be crushed instantly under the immense weight. One miscommunication between saws, one moment's hesitation, could send the tree toppling in an unplanned direction with lethal results. Getting the logs out of the swamp required the use of a machine called the Swamp Angel, a steam-powered skidder that used massive drums and steel cables to drag felled logs from terrain that had previously made logging impossible. Those cables, thick as a man's wrist, operated under tensions that transformed them into lethal weapons. When they snapped, and they did snap, they whipped through the air with the force of a cannon shot, slicing through anything in their path. The steel cable could cut through a man as if he weren't there, as one logger put it. They called working with these machines walking the death line. Supporting the Swamp Angel were steam-powered winches mounted on sleds and rails, nicknamed donkey engines since they replaced mule teams. The men operating them, donkey punchers, had to work the clutch controls with split-second timing. Standing inches from cables under massive tension, they guided tons of timber through treacherous terrain. The engine's deafening roar drowned out any warning sounds of approaching danger. And each engine relied on steam power, adding another layer of risk. Boilers required constant monitoring and maintenance. Any failure meant an explosion of scalding steam and shrapnel. In the punishing heat and humidity, keeping these machines running safely was as dangerous as the logging itself. The statistics told the brutal truth. Logging deaths in the early 1900s ran 30 times higher than any other industrial work. By the 1920s, 1 in 200 loggers died annually. More telling was the 5-year rate. 1 in 5 loggers could expect either death or serious injury in that span. Inside the mill, where Centralia's raw timber became the lumber feeding America's growth, the pace never slowed. The double bandsaws processed 100,000 board feet daily. That's enough lumber to build 10 average-sized homes every single day. This brutal pace meant changing the massive saw blades every 8 minutes. Workers handled these red-hot blades in Florida's crushing humidity while dodging the constant motion of logs and machinery. The mill pond, where logs were floated in for processing, claimed its share of lives. Workers who slipped under the shifting logs rarely surfaced. Even routine operations carried hidden costs. The deafening roar of machinery guaranteed hearing loss. Sawdust filled workers' lungs, leading to chronic bronchitis and mill fever. Open wounds quickly festered in the swamp environment, even with Dr. Johnson on site. When the 50 Greeks arrived from Tarpon Springs, they took one look at the operation and refused swamp work entirely. They'd seen the earth shake when these giants fell, watched the chaos when a cable snapped or a log rolled. They chose to stick to stacking lumber, a decision that even veteran loggers respected. This intricate machine of industrial logging drove Centralia's unprecedented output. Every technical innovation, from the specialized saws to the steam-powered skidders, increased both efficiency and risk. One miscalculation, one moment of fatigue, one hidden flaw in the wood, and the difference between life and death came down to pure luck. The daily quota meant constant pressure, constant danger, and a steady toll of injuries and deaths. As the ancient cypress forest fell at a record pace, the cost of Robert's vision accumulated in both broken bodies and lost limbs. But these dangers, brutal as they were, weren't destined to be Centralia's actual undoing. The logs kept moving, the saws kept turning, and Centralia's empire of timber continued its relentless expansion. By 1912, the double-band sawmill was running at full tilt. The pace was astonishing, but Robert's ambitions didn't stop there. Tram lines that initially only stretched 6 miles into the swamp tripled to 18 miles within 5 years. The speed of expansion was unprecedented. Centralia was growing faster than anyone could fully comprehend. The town operated with seamless efficiency, every element fine-tuned to keep the mill fed. At the transfer platform, narrow-gauge trams met standard rail lines, sending timber north to Port Tampa and on to markets across the country. From swamp to schooner to skyscraper, Centralia's lumber flowed with mechanical precision. That same year brought what many believe to be Centralia's greatest triumph, a cypress log so massive that dynamite was required to quarter it. When hauled to the mill, its 16-foot sections yielded over 6,000 board feet of lumber. Al Weinman, one of the mill's most trusted sawyers, supervised the cuts, ensuring that every bored foot was extracted with precision. The loss from defects was negligible, a fact Weinman noted with pride. For weeks, the top section of the log sat mounted on a flat car for display, a symbol of what Centralia had achieved and what it believed it could still conquer. Guests at the hotel could purchase Centralia postcards, 24 images in total, to write home. The postcards showcased the operation in all its scale and precision. The sawmill, the tram lines disappearing into the swamp, the drying yards stacked high with cypress, and the shingle and lathe mill that turned every scrap of wood into something useful. Every part of the town worked in perfect rhythm. The trams moved without pause, hauling timber faster and farther than anyone had thought possible. Each new mile of track carried them deeper into the swamp, pulling back trees that had stood for centuries. As forester Stan Weston wrote in the St. Petersburg Times in 1962, "Was not this blanket of forest inexhaustible? Wasn't it a wasteland of wilderness, jungle, something to be removed so that civilization might advance? Leave seed trees? Plant new trees? Seedlings? Ridiculous," they thought. Never would this sea of virgin timber be exhausted. Then, one morning in 1917, the unthinkable happened. There were no more logs. The forest was gone. Where the tram lines had once carried log after log to the mill, now there was nothing. For the first time, the workers stood idle. The saws, which had roared for 6 days a week, fell silent. The cypress left drying in the sun was the last of it, the last of the great forest that once was. The people of the town were left staring at what remained, barren stumps and endless mud. The swamp they had conquered, mile by mile, was now just a wasteland. There was nothing left to feed the mill, no reason to keep the machinery running. Centralia wasn't supposed to be like all those other logging towns. It was supposed to be different. The forest wasn't supposed to run out. Where other camps were little more than rough collections of bunkhouses for workmen, Edgar Roberts had built hotels, schools, restaurants, a real community. Centralia was supposed to be different. It all ended with a whistle. Queen Roberts, Edgar Roberts' young daughter, was lifted onto a platform to reach the cord of the steam whistle that had marked time in Centralia for 7 years. She pulled it down, tying it off. For 30 long minutes, the whistle screamed across the barren stumps and hollow streets, echoing through what was left of Centralia. Dogs howled. Men and women stood in silence, tears streaking their faces. Some clung to one another, others simply stared, unseeing, at the ruins of what had been their home. The sound carried over what had once been a forest, now nothing but an expanse of mud and broken roots. That night, the Flicker Palace opened as usual, but no one came. George Gamble's commissary, once the heartbeat of the town, closed its doors for the last time. The hungry nun served its final meal. Families packed their belongings into wagons and rail cars, leaving their whitewashed homes behind. The Tampa Northern Railroad began pulling up its tracks. Machinery was sold off or abandoned to rust in the humid air. Within weeks, the town was gone, the swamp reclaiming what had once been its own. By 1938, all traces of the railroad were gone, the wilderness swallowing the sidewalks and foundations of Centralia. Forester Stan Weston would later write, "The lifeblood of Centralia flowed from its mill, and when the timber was cut, the stream dried up." The ruins of Centralia hide in Florida's wilderness. The concrete ramp where logs once crawled towards the saw still rises from the earth, half buried in vines. Steel rails rust beneath layers of fallen leaves. The foundations of the mill, the scattered remnants of machinery, the float pond where giants once waited for the blade, all slowly vanishing beneath tangles of green. Walk through that land today, and you'll feel what's buried here, the dreams of families who thought they could build forever. the blood of workers who died, believing this place was different. Margaret Dershmer spent 46 years teaching in Brooksville after Centralia disappeared. She watched Florida change, saw towns rise and fade, carried the memory of what made this place special. As a child, she never questioned why they were way out in the woods. She just knew that here, unlike the other logging camps, families could build real homes. Workers from across the world, Scotland, France, Finland, America, came because they believed in something more than timber. They paid in blood for that belief. Every Sunday walk down Front Street, every piece of candy from Mr. Gamble's store, every moment of normal life, fought with broken bones and snapping cables. The swamp tried to kill them daily, but they kept working, kept bleeding, kept believing that what they built here would last. Florida's woods are littered with the ghosts of logging camps, rough shacks where men lived apart from their families, working themselves to exhaustion before moving on to the next forest. But Centralia's ruins remain. The concrete foundations, the steel fragments, stand as testament to a place where a French sawyer from Lourdes would dress in his finest clothes to promenade the boardwalk each evening, where a Scottish trail cutter's collections of fine guns and pipes drew visitors from miles around, where 50 Greeks from Tarpon Springs transformed the culture of an entire town. This wasn't just another temporary camp. This was a place where people built lives, where families put down roots, where children grew up believing the forest would always provide. Those ancient cypress trees are gone now. The town they fed is gone, but these ruins remain in Florida's wilderness, silent evidence of what blood and sacrifice bought, and how quickly it all disappeared. But Centralia's story doesn't end in loss. It's also a story of resilience. In that same St. Petersburg Times article from January in 1962, Stan Weston reported that J.C. Turner Lumber Co. had launched a long-range reforestation program on 20,000 acres stretching along the coast southward from the Citrus County line. According to the article, in the past 32 years, 4 million trees have been planted in Hernando and Pasco. 2 million pine seedlings were set out just this past season. The Chazawiska Wildlife Management Area now stands where Centralia once thrived, with planting continuing each year, clearing barren spots and planting slash pine, perfectly suited to the soil. The forest has grown back, the wildlife has returned, and nature, true to form, has found a way to reclaim what was taken. Centralia's story isn't just about a forgotten town. It's a glimpse into the wild complexities of human ambition and the relentless power of nature to reclaim its own. Stories like these remind us why we explore Florida's past, to uncover the strange, the untamed, and the deeply human. Thank you for stepping into the complexities of cypress logging with me. If you enjoyed this dive into Florida's hidden history, be sure to follow Mysteries of the Marsh on Instagram for more behind-the-scenes looks and exclusive finds. Until next time, stay curious, respect the swamps, and, as always, don't feed the gators.